Sony has finally figured out what makes a good superhero movie. The sequel to their first animated Spidey flick, Into the Spiderverse, Across the Spiderverse, currently sits as the #1 movie in the world. While it may be #1 on the charts, some celebs have other opinions on the subject and on Marvel as a whole. Welcome to Beyond the Screen, I'm Nate, and today we're breaking down the top 10 celebrities who hated Across the Spider-Verse. Number 10, Timothee Chalamet. Tim first popped into the acting scene when he starred in the romantic drama Call Me By Your Name in 2017. Since then, he's been offered role after role and is slowly becoming Hollywood's new young leading man, taking on the role of Paul Atreides in the Dune series, and he is currently set to play Willy Wonka in a prequel film set to release around Christmas this year. With this slow rise to the leading man status, it's inevitable that he would take up a role for the Marvel company, right? Yeah, wrong. Fun fact, Timothy actually auditioned to play Peter Parker in the 2016 movie Civil War, but was passed up for Tom Holland. It appears that this decision instilled a sense of hatred towards superhero flicks for Tim. During an interview with his Dune co-star Zendaya, the topic of Marvel was brought up as she's currently playing the MCU's version of Mary Jane Watson. Chalamet's response to "Would you ever do a Marvel movie?" was, "I'm like Leo DiCaprio. No hard drugs, no superhero movies." So far, he's kept to his word, and we're almost certain that he did not see the newest Spider-Man installment, simply because, well, he just couldn't bear the pain. Number 9, Simon Pegg. Simon Pegg is no stranger to the comic book world, as not only was he the physical basis for the character Huey in Garth Ennis's dark comic series The Boys, he was eventually cast to play the character's father in the live-action Amazon series adaptation. During an interview for his role in the Star Trek reboot, Simon was asked about his opinions on Marvel and if he would ever join the team should the call come. He cited the lengthy multiple movie contracts as controlling. In case you were unaware, there's a stipulation in Marvel contracts that if your character is needed for anything during that period of your contract, you're obligated to show up. That means that if Chris Evans was shooting a movie across the world, they could just call him and say, "Hey, we need Captain America to make a video for Spider-Man's gym class," and he would be forced to do it. Simon is an actor that has tried many things over the years creatively, and being bogged down by Marvel's crazy contracts didn't suit his style. So it's no surprise that Pegg turned down the opportunity to voice one of the many Spider people in this movie. Even though it would have been like a brief, maybe 30-second cameo, he didn't want to risk the possibility of being tricked into playing a wacky Scottish version of Spider-Man or something. Man, that would have been cool though. Number 8, John Boyega. John Boyega made his big screen debut playing Finn in the final trilogy of Star Wars movies. He played the Force-sensitive former stormtrooper for 3 films spanning over 4 years. He's been quoted as claiming that being part of a franchise was like a luxury prison. You work on one character for many years, which can starve your other muscles. Think about Robert Downey Jr. He played Iron Man for 11 years. He was Iron Man. And despite filming several other projects during his time as the Man of Iron, his performances were always stiff, or just reminded us of his role in Marvel. Even now, after, spoiler alert, his character died, he's still a billionaire genius playboy philanthropist. On top of this, John has expressed his disdain towards the character of Spider-Man being rebooted over and over again. While Into the Spider-Verse is only the second on-screen portrayal of the character Miles Morales, it's the 10th Spider-Man movie to be released since 2000. Needless to say, having a million Spider-Men in one movie was just a bit too much for John to handle, and he surely opted to see The Little Mermaid instead. Number 7, Seth Rogen. Seth Rogen is a perpetual teenager. This man is the nerdiest of nerds. Seth has always been vocal on his love for comics. His company Point Grey even helped to produce the hit Amazon series The Boys, based on the comics of the same name. Seth has made several cameos on the show, and now voices a character named Alan the Alien in another comic turned Amazon series called Invincible. Both of these shows are incredible, and if you haven't seen them yet, just do it. Recently, Seth was asked if he would ever dip his toe into the Marvel pond. Seth actually said that despite his love of comics, he found Marvel movies to be marketed for kids as opposed to actual comic book fans. While Into the Spider-Verse isn't technically a part of Disney's MCU, it falls into the category of Marvel, and Seth don't want no part of that. No, sir. Instead, it looks like Seth is developing his Sony's own animated superverse with the news of a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated film being produced by and starring Seth himself. Seriously, Google the cast, it's gonna be such a good movie. Number 6, Jon Hamm. So Jon Hamm, let's talk about him. He's such an incredible actor. He steals the show in every project he's ever been in. Baby Driver, Black Mirror, Mad Men. This dude is awesome. Jon has almost starred in the MCU a couple of times actually. He was eyed to play Star-Lord before Chris Pratt was offered the role in Guardians of the Galaxy, and he was the second choice to play Doctor Strange should Benedict Cumberbatch have turned them down. He did eventually become a part of Marvel, technically speaking. You see, there's a short but sweet animated Marvel series called MODOK, based around the titular villain's day-to-day life as an evil genius and a father. Hamm lent his voice to the role of Iron Man in the show, delivering a sarcastic, wisecracking performance that was on par with RDJ. Jon is another celebrity with an issue with Marvel contracts. He called the deals that they make draconian. You see, for MODOK, he only had to sign a 10-episode contract instead of a multi-film, multi-year deal. The animated world is much simpler to navigate, but from what we know so far, Jon Hamm has seen Across the Spider-Verse, and he's one of the few people in the world who just didn't really care for it. Number 5, Jason Statham. Jason Statham is well known for his action chops, starring in films like Crank, The Expendables, and the Fast and Furious franchise. He's played the iconic character Deckard Shaw in the franchise since Fast and Furious 6, even starring alongside Dwayne Johnson's character in a spin-off buddy action movie called Hobbs and Shaw. Despite his mega action chops, Jason has made it very clear that he wants nothing to do with superhero movies. He said, live-action ones rely upon stunt doubles and CGI, and animated ones are gorgeous, but the fear is taken away from me when I know the character I'm watching is just ink and computers. He hasn't made his opinion on Across the Spider-Verse public yet, but we can assume based on that quote that his audience score is just a big fat 0. Number 4, Quentin Tarantino. Film director and pediatric enthusiast Quentin Tarantino has been pumping out hit after hit since his first feature film Reservoir Dogs was released in 1992. He has gone on to create cult classic flicks like Pulp Fiction and Inglourious Basterds. A little while back, while doing press for his most recent flick Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he was asked if he'd ever take a break from making his own flicks and lend his creativity to the Marvel world, to which he replied, "What? You'd have to be a hired hand to do those things. He's not a hired hand, he's not looking for a job." Throwing just a little bit of shade, basically saying, I'm too busy being myself to work for you people. He even boasted about how him and several other directors just can't wait for the fad of Marvel movies to finally die out. He unfortunately fell victim to the sound issues plaguing Across the Spider-Verse's initial film release. You see, many theaters have reported a corrupted file being distributed to their theaters and the sound's all messed up. Kind of like when Cats got released too early and the CGI just was not done. I was lucky enough to see that version, and it is the superior version. The sound issues on top of the outlandish story was just too much for him, and he's given the #1 movie in the world a thumbs down. I don't know, I don't really trust the opinion of a man who has must-show feet in his actors' contracts. Number 3, Jake Gyllenhaal. Jake Gyllenhaal and Marvel have a history that starts as far back as 1999. Jake was asked to audition to play the role of Peter Parker in Sam Raimi's upcoming Spider-Man live-action flick. He auditioned with fellow heavyweights like Tom Cruise, Leo DiCaprio, and the late great Heath Ledger. All of these men were passed up for Tobey Maguire, who went on to deliver a now legendary performance as the first on-screen Spider-Man. Yeah, and yes, we're ignoring the live-action Japanese Spider-Man from the 70s because it's basically just Power Rangers. Jake did, however, get cast as the big bad Mysterio in the second MCU Spider-Man installment, Far From Home. Jake is a wild, wacky, goofy man trapped in an adult body. You would think the idea of a multiversal mashup of animated Spider-Man would be right up his alley. Well, apparently Jake is a home team kind of guy, and he stated that the MCU Spider-Man is the ultimate Spider-Man, and he will not be tricked into thinking otherwise. Not only has he not seen the Spider-Verse movies, he's boycotted Sony's Spidey properties entirely. Too bad for him. No Tom Hardy Venom for you, Jake. Number 2, Amanda Seyfried. You may recognize Amanda from several silver screen successes over the years. My personal favorite was when she played Karen in Mean Girls. She can tell when it's raining. In 2015, Amanda actually turned down a role in the MCU as Gamora in Guardians of the Galaxy, and for a pretty valid reason. She didn't want to be green for 6 months out of every year. She also mentioned that she had little to no fight experience and didn't really feel confident in her ability to perform her own stunts, no matter how minimal. When it comes to the world of Marvel in general, Amanda is actually a pretty big fan, stating several times that she's happy to be an audience member, just don't put her in a suit or anything like that. That is, however, her opinion on the MCU MCU, the Sony side of things, very different. Sony still technically owns several Spider-Man properties, including a handful of villains like Venom and Morbius, both of which have their own solo movies. Needless to say, Sony's Spidey content has been rough from the start, with their version of Spider-Man, being played by Andrew Garfield, being the only live-action Spidey to not receive a third movie. This rough road was enough to make Amanda skeptical, and she has steered clear of the Sonyverse ever since. And at number 1, Stephen Dorff. You may recognize Stephen Dorff from a little Marvel movie called Blade, but it's not the shiny, fun Disney Marvel though. Blade was actually one of the first successful live-action screen adaptations of a Marvel property. It starred Wesley Snipes as the titular character, a vampire hunter who is half vampire himself. The villain of the piece was Deacon Frost, the leader of a vampiric clan and future host to the god La Magra. Man, Marvel was unhinged in the 90s. Despite his involvement in the flick, Dorff has stated several times that if asked to return to the world of Marvel Comics, he would decline that offer with no questions asked. He was recently asked about his feelings on the upcoming reboot for Blade for the MCU, and he said that Marvel was becoming garbage, claiming that the real comic movies were gritty and dark like the original Blade trilogy, which certainly didn't shy away from its gory source material. Of course he would hate Spider-Verse then. It's so colorful and vibrant. He went on to say that while he respects the hustle, that most Marvel movies will never be remembered as fondly as Blade. Okay, the only thing I remember about Blade was the terrible CGI and your weird performance, Steven. Those are the celebrities that hated Across the Spider-Verse. How did you enjoy Sony's latest Spidey pick? Leave a comment down below and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for checking out our content, and as always, we will see you next time.